Hello, everybody. It is Monday. It's hopefully drama free. Hi, Rhonda. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hope you're having a decent moment. How about that? It's really good to see you. Think about you a lot. Hello, Sharon. I am doing well. Still in the throes of the moving process, but it's getting closer and closer and closer. Closer and closer. And one of these days, I'm going to be able to come here and I'm going to be able to say to you, it's done. I can see the end. I can see the end. The end is in sight. It just hasn't fully happened yet. I got into a bunch more dust again. So hopefully I'm not going to let that go crazy. Hi, Connie. Oh, you're welcome. Good. I'm glad it got there safely. Good. Hi, Peggy. I got your message today. I did not have time I couldn't answer the phone. I was in the process of carrying stuff down and putting it on shelves. But anyway, I'm glad you got it, Peggy and Connie. Hello, Terry. Good to see you all. Great to have you here. Okay, so I have some things I was going to show you. I have other things. I have many things to show you. And then we're going to paint. Right away, we're going to start painting. However, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I wanted to show you. Okay? I had in my family room at my house, I had years ago, back in 2012 or the end of 2011, I don't know what I had painted on that wall. Oh, I do know. I'd painted a big phoenix on the wall. Big one. And I decided I didn't like it anymore. That's typical of me. I go, yep, done with that. Ready to move on. Get over it. And so I painted over the whole wall and kind of sponge painted a background, sort of, kind of an innocuous texture, kind of a mottled green and gray kind of a background. So it was just plain. It was wiped out the phoenix. And because I was ready to move on. And so then I started in January of 2012, I started this self-assigned project, and many of you were probably around then. Hi, Julie. It is a good book. Your Brain on Art is a very good book. Yep, it really is. I'm reading it in small doses. I carry it around with me a lot. That's also typical of me, to carry a book around. I always like to have something with me in case I get stuck somewhere, so I can either write or read. But I don't do arithmetic while I'm stuck. No. Hey, Angela, good to see you. So anyway, on this wall, I decided I was going to do this little experiment with myself. It was a self-assigned thing to see if I could do a canvas every day for that entire year. They were small. I only did it for 180 days, but that was still half the year. And so that was pretty good. And so most of them, not all of them, but most of them, I would just put up on the wall every day. As I was finished with the canvas, I'd add it to the wall. And there were maybe 2 or 3, I guess 3 large canvases that I had on there, and then all the small ones that I added to it. So I thought I would show you some of them because I took down the wall. Hey, Ruth, good to see you. Hope you're having an okay day. Hope you are. Hey, Mary. Oh, it's great to have you here. I know. I always have something with me. I mean, I have to have something with me. And if I don't have it in my purse, I have the bag in the car. So if I get stuck, I got something I can do. It drives me crazy to just sit and do and feel like I should be doing something. Now, if I'm sitting still and I fall asleep for some reason, I'm like, well, that's still positive. You know what I mean? Anyway, where were we? So I took down the wall of canvases. So it had a lot of canvases, and I had put them all up with T-pins, which was a suggestion by a friend of mine because they're canvas boards. So, it's like I'm not mounting those sawtooth hangers on all these. I don't know what to do with them. And she suggested using T-pins. She's also an artist and fine artist. Her degree is in art. She taught art for a while in the school system. And so she suggested using those and putting them in the wall underneath and on top of the canvases. So I could put them in, put the T-pins in as far as they needed to go, and then I could turn them so they functioned like a little bar at the bottom of each canvas. So I did a lot of double duty with the canvases. So one T-pin would support the top of one canvas, and then it would support the bottom of the next one. Anyway. So let me just say, I took down the T-pins today, and it took me over an hour, like an hour and a half, to get all the T-pins out of that wall. But I took down all the canvases yesterday, and Elton came, he was working at his office, and he came by and helped me finish taking them down. And I kept the ones I wanted, and I threw the rest of them away, which was painful for him. He's like, don't do this, don't throw these away. I'm like, this is why you can't help me. You can't help me here a lot, because you want me to keep everything. It's like, can't do that. I don't want to see another T-pin, but I kept them just in case I need them for some reason. Anyway, I'm going to show you some today, and I'll show you the rest of them on Friday, this coming Friday. So I started out with 6x8 canvases, and so I bought a whole bunch of, I got to get my wits about me here. I bought a whole bunch of 6x8 canvas boards, and so I used up all those, because you blow through those really fast. When you're using 7 of them a week, you blow through a lot of them. And the year I started doing that, they were really super cheap at Michael's. Well, then they quit making I couldn't get the 6x8s because I bought everything they had. And so then I went to 5x7, and I used a ton of those. And then I had Clausman cut me some Masonite 5x7 and 6x8s. Hey, Evelyn. Good to see you. Nice to have you join us. So, anyway, so there was a variety, and then there were 3 stretched canvases that I had on the wall too. Anyway, so I thought I'd show you some of them since I just took them down. And these are the ones that I've decided to keep. So this was a magazine image that I painted over, and it was a variety of techniques. Basically, they're more like an art journal page as opposed to a real bona fide canvas. But there's everything from acrylic paint to alcohol ink to collage to paint over an image, which is what this is. So she was an image from some magazine or advertisement or whatever, and I painted over it and embellished her. And then this was a stamp, I believe. It was either a stamp or a quote that somebody sent me. I don't remember. Anyway, so there's that one. And then on the back, I stamped the date. So this was January 3rd, and this was all in 2012. So you can see this was what the panels were that I got. So it was a 3-pack panel 6x8. So that's what it was. So they're not very thick. And so if you put a T-pin is just perfect for hanging these on a wall, mounting them on a wall, and it left a really small hole in the sheetrock. And believe me, there were a lot of holes in that sheetrock. A lot of holes. So in the background there's a lot of collage, there's some texture paste of some kind, and I have no idea, maybe alcohol ink, I don't know. I'm not sure what's on there. Anyway, so there's that one. And I was going through this time. I went through an experience for several years of, it was pretty rough. And it was pretty rough. And so, and that was before Clausman started his descent into his journey. And so the making of art and the doing of what I was experimenting with and learning about was all about the healing that creativity helped to bring into my life. And so that's what this one was about. And when I very first started this self-assigned project, I started out with doing a color scheme or a color combination that I was going to do for a week. Well, that lasted for a while, and then I went, I just cannot do 7 days worth of pink and blue or red, white, and black, or, I ran out of ideas. Now, if I had had the color cubes back then, which I have now, that would have lasted easily through the year because I could have, those are all already done, the color schemes are already done. But sometimes I wasn't feeling it, so I gave that up after a little while. Anyway, so this has collage in the background. It also has a lot of scraps on this. This has die cuts on it. The flowers are die cuts. So that's what those are. This, and this are die cut. These are stamps that I colored with something. I have no idea what. The music is stamps in the background. There's stenciling. There's some gold dot stenciling on it. And that's what I can tell you about that, because I really don't know. Yeah, the color cubes are great. So there's that one. That was done January 9th of 2012. And as I was working through this project, and now this is one of the smaller canvases, as I was working through this project, one of the things that I began to discover, because I was getting, I'd been streaming for several years, but I was working my way back through to a place of being mentally and emotionally healthy again. And so I could tell how much better I was feeling as I did this every day when this one came up. And this was all stamped with those dollar bin stamps that they had at Michael's for a while. And sometimes you just have to face it, life is good. And I knew I was feeling a lot better when that was what came up with that. That's what came to mind. These are paper clay faces done in molds. So the molds were things that I bought at probably Michael's in the polymer clay section. And paper clay is an air dry clay, or it could be Model Magic. That's also an air dry clay in the kids section. But they're three-dimensional. Well, not three-dimensional, but they're not just flat. I guess three-dimensional is the right term. And then I painted these with Lumiere paints. These are painted with the Lumiere paints. Some of them have a two-tone effect. That's the paint. And so I love Lumiere paint. The background on this one I know is alcohol ink, and it's on top of because these are alcohol ink splats. So you can use alcohol ink on paper. It reacts differently than it does on a non-porous, or on a non-porous surface. So anyway, but that was when I could tell I was feeling better and better. This one I loved, and the reason I loved this is because this little bird figure right here, it certainly can, Terry, you are right. This little bird figure was laying in my backyard, and my neighbors next door to me across the fence had little girls at the time. They went on to have a little boy, and I don't know if they had more children. They moved, and I've kind of lost touch with them. But frequently things would come over the fence, balls and toys and stuff. And I always wanted kids to come over, but I had dogs. And so I always told the parents, I said, look, if something comes over the fence, just come over and tell me. I'll go get it for you. But tell me pretty quick so the dogs don't chew it up. Well, one day I went outside, and here was this little bird image. This is just one of the little kids, the little girls had drawn and colored this little bird. I love the Lumiere paints too. They work so well on fabric and paper. So this little bird was laying in the grass, and I thought, okay. So I picked it up and I looked at it, and I just stuck it in my stash of things. And we had a bird's nest that the birds insisted on building on top of one of our wind chimes. And so I took pictures of it and used it for different things. And then I kept the bird's nest for a long time because I used it for props, put it in the freezer for a while to kill anything that was inside of it. And then used it for different things. So I printed out the image of the bird's nest, cut the little bird, put him in the nest, added some feathers, and this technique back here is a technique that I've done a bunch of times, where you do a whole bunch of writing about whatever it is. It's a processing type thing, so a form of journaling. So I did a whole bunch of journaling on this one piece of paper that the color was the blues and purples and all of that, aquas and teals and stuff. And then you go back and cut out your letters. So you've gotten the journaling out of your system, whatever it is that you're working on. But when you cut out the letters, I don't have any idea what I was writing about, but you still get the idea of the letters. So I think I did most of it in Sharpie. A lot of times I'll do it with different kinds of black pens, so I have different textures when I do that. So those letters are applied on top over, looks like a tissue paper background. There's texture in the background and stamping and, probably alcohol ink. And then a lot of shadowing using charcoal pencils and some white scallops that kind of gave it a lacy appearance. And that was June 7th, day 159. This one, so I will always remember those little girls sending me a present over my fence. I don't know how it got there, but anyway, it didn't matter. This was an image from all of these were images from those super old magazines that I showed you a while back. These are color copies. And then this little image came out of a magazine, one of those little babies. I can't remember who the artist is, the photographer that takes those pictures. And so this is not a stork, it's a parrot or something. So I put the little baby in the parrot's beak. In the background, again, is probably alcohol ink and some collage and splatters. And then I don't know where this came from, probably a magazine. Yeah, I think that might be her name. Anne. Could be. The University of Missouri And well, actually, in the town that I live in, there are two sets of columns at the end of the same street. One is on the university campus, and the other one is the old courthouse. And they're on the same street. They're many blocks apart. Both of those structures were destroyed by fire. And so this set of columns, I cut these out of, some publication or something. And all of this is basically cut collage bits and pieces. Has a lot of texture paste in the background through stencils and what have you. When I was doing this, I was really fascinated with stencil paste or stencil, like modeling paste through stencils. And then once it was dry, I would let the alcohol inks or whatever drip down and color the dried modeling paste. And there's some stamping and what have you in that. And that was February 22nd. So anyway, wonder and explore for sure. Ann Lang, Ann Geddes, I don't know, and somebody. This was in my texture phase. This was when I had learned about Finnebair's technique, and so I played around with this. So this has a ton of stuff on this canvas. This was in February. This has a ton of crap, literally crap. It's got ribbons, and it's got bits and pieces of paper, and it's got the produce bags that you get, oranges and onions and stuff like that, and that's added. This is some of that grunge board or grunge paper. I think this is grunge board that Tim Holtz used to have. This is metal. This is probably grunge paper, I think, but I'm not sure. And then this is vellum that I glued on top of that. Vellum does not like to get wet, so it's kind of wrinkly and messy. Whatever you are, be a good one. Yeah. And there's a lot of paper scraps and fabric scraps and all kinds of junk in the back. But anyway, it's the secret. It's the key. It's the secret to who you are. Whatever you are, be a good one. Be good at it. And this is a technique. Doing this paint technique in the background was from somebody else, some other artist online that liked to do, I don't know, not faux finish, but maybe faux finish type stuff. It was a man, and he used to take dolls. He would buy junk dolls and doll parts, plastic and vinyl and all that, and he would use them in his art, in his sculptures. And I forgot who he was too. He and his wife were both artists, and he used to do videos long time ago. And so one of his videos in this, he did this paint combination, which I was just fascinated with, and I've used this several times in different applications. You can do it in an art journal page, you can do it on a canvas, but it ends up making it look like metal, and I love that technique. And then I rubbed some copper paint to pick up the highlights and stuff. But it's two different colors of paint. So one of them is a purple, and the other one is nickel azo gold, I think. I've forgotten exactly. I'd have to go back and look it up. But anyway, it's two different colors of paint that make that coppery, bronzy, yucky looking color. This is one, and that one, let's see, when was that one? That was February 28th, that heavy textured one. This was from a picture that we took of Muppet, and we'd thrown a blanket over her, and she just stuck her nose out. This is when she's quite young. Stuck her nose out from under the blanket, and so this was when I was doing this color combination in the background, like pink and green or whatever. She was a huge challenge to train. She was a big challenge. And so hence the words, patience expands your capacity to love and feel peace, because she required an enormous amount of patience. She did not want to be trained, and she loved living with us, but she wanted to be the boss. And so anyway, so this is a combination of collage in the background, and this is not the color of the couch she was laying on, by the way. It's totally different, but and then I went back over it, painted over it, and that was in February that year that she and I walked. And this is no exaggeration, when we first got her, for the first 2 years of her life, because she was a combination of very active breeds of dog. She was a rescue from a pet agency, not agency, but a pet rescue. And she had been returned twice to 2 different pet rescue places. And so we were finally ready to get another dog, and so we went in and she picked us. She picked Claus Man. Still have her. She is almost 17. She'll be 17 this summer, and coming up real close, so she might as well be 17, working on 18. She is a trip. Oh my goodness, she is a challenge. Whew. Anyway, this is another one of her. This one was a picture that we took, and then this whole thing is painted over a background of probably tissue paper or something. Let's see if I can catch it. You can see the wrinkles. This was in the red and black. Yeah, February. This was during the red and black and white week. And so this was Muppet, the picture that we took of her. The best things in life are not things, and she is proof of that. She is proof of that. Your mom said the same thing about men, about you. I read that as men. That's funny. They're hard to train. Yeah. Anyway, so that's Miss Muppet, and there's stamping and stuff in the background, but anyway, she still wears this red collar, but now it just about comes off of her. It's she's lost a lot of weight, but she's still hanging in there, and she's still happy, and she still likes to eat. So as long as she's happy and can still move around, we're good. She has a lot of trouble getting up and down now, but she's still hanging in there with us. This was a lot of handwriting in the background. Most of this was letters from the guy that I used to work with, or notes that I rescued out of the trash, or copies of things, and some stamping in the background, and then a whole bunch of postage stamps that I had in the background. And then I found this was on a calendar, one of those page-a-day calendars. To send a letter is a good way to go somewhere without moving anything but your heart. I thought that was great. I thought that was really great. So I used, some of the canceled postmarks and stamps and parts of letters, and this was his handwriting, and there's some stamping, literal stamping from some of the handwriting stamps that I have. Anyway, that one was in January. Okay, and then this next one, I've only got 3 more to show you, and then we'll start painting. This one was, this robin was outside my window looking into the house, and it just stayed there, and it came back. I think the same bird came back several days, but it would just stay and look inside the window. And this was in April of that year, and she was, I guess it's a she, I don't know, was just a beautiful bird. And so what I did on this is I painted the background, finger painted in clouds. This is probably alcohol ink. I don't know. Could be acrylic paint. And this was an image transfer. And this is one of the first image transfers that actually worked. It was great. It worked. And so, look well into thyself. There is a source of strength that will always spring up if thou wilt always look there. Yeah. Anyway, I just remember the days that that robin came to visit, and it was just such a treat. This one, I don't really know what it was that made me want to do a pair. Probably maybe the color combination. I don't know. This was in February that year. I don't know. So anyway, I did the background in probably tissue paper, lightweight papers of some kind. You can see the texture. And the pair, after I did the background, I suppose, I don't remember for sure. It's been a long time since I did these. But the pear is drawn on, and then I painted it. Yeah, it's painted over that background. This is fabric. The leaf is fabric that I had in my stash. The rest of this pear is painted. And so this was just harvest fresh ideas. And that was a lot of fun to do. I hadn't painted anything like that in a long time, and I certainly had not added fabric into what I was doing at that point, but I loved the background. Yeah. And then this one, this is the last one I'll show you tonight. This image, this is where this came from, was this image. It was in a magazine. And so the background is this magazine image. This is part of the magazine image, and then whatever's back here, I don't know what's back there, honestly. But this is the wood carver here. And if you've been hanging around me for any time at all, you know that Clausman was a wood carver. And he used to always, people would say to him, how do you come up with your ideas, and how do you do, you know, the carving things that you do? And his answer was always, well, it was like the Michelangelo answer, well, you just carve off everything that's not the whatever, the figure. And Michelangelo would say that about the marble and the statues that he made, that he carved. Carved is probably not the right word for the materials he used, but anyway, you got the idea. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for while knowledge defines all we currently know and understand, imagination leads us to all we might yet discover and create. And so that was a stamp from someplace, and this was from a magazine. But I had to keep this one just because it just reminds me of all of the many hours that we spent, Clausman and I spent in the same studio space back to back. I would be doing my stuff, and he would be carving and revealing whatever was inside that piece of wood, you know. And so I had to keep that one. And that one was in January 24th. Yeah. He sculpted. That's right. That's the word. Sculpted. Okay, so I have about that many more canvases I'll show you Friday. So there you go. Absolutely. Okay, so let's get back to our little canvas, or not canvas, but our little gnome home. Here is the beginning of our little gnome house. And all I've done is to paint it. I painted all around it and just base coated in. So I've thought a lot about how do I want to do this little house, and everything I'm working with, this little house and the gnomes and the mushrooms, all came from Hobby Lobby. And inexpensive, super inexpensive. This was the most expensive piece, and it was $5. But there's way more than $5 worth of work in this. Anyways, what I did on this is, and I did not seal the wood to start with. I didn't seal it, I didn't sand it, I just painted it. I'm going to let the roughness work for me. And so this has a combination. I just squirted some paints out on my palette, and then I brush mixed them together. These three colors, so there was a tan, a burnt umber, and a burnt sienna. And I just brush mixed them on the palette, which means I'm trying to get a mottled look. And thank you guys. And so then I just kept picking up paint with some water to get it to move and just base coated this in. So I have a basis for what I'm going to do. Okay? So everything has a coat of paint on it. To get the roof, which I think I'm going to do a kind of a thatched mossy roof kind of thing, I did the brown or the burnt umber and some of this green, which is light avocado. Did those two colors together and may have picked up a little bit of the tan in my brush. Again, just to give it a base, you know, kind of like a dirty base coat. And then the chimney I painted in tomato spice, which is this rusty red color. That's what I filled in the chimney with. And there was also brown in the brush, so it had some brown going on. So we have the house, the beginning of the house. The mushrooms are base coated, and so I thought I would show those to you. So they, you know, they're not exactly the same, but I didn't want them exactly the same. They're very similar. I went around and painted all of the edges. So you need to paint the edges of things like this, even though they're thin, in my opinion, but that's what it is. It's my opinion. I paint the edges. And then on the back, this has nothing on it yet, but eventually I will come back and I will just give this a coat of paint on the back. Because what happens with, especially with things that are this thin, you really need to have paint on all the surfaces. It will help prevent warping. So, and these will go back here. At least that's what I think will happen, is I think they will go behind the house as, you know, as little, almost to act like trees behind the house. And these are the gnomes. They are base coated also. So they have their little, all their little colors base coated in. Again, carrying the colors around the edges. So they are totally painted around the edges. And again, they'll eventually have a coat of paint on the back so that they won't continue to warp. These are super cheap little things, but I don't know how in the world they can produce these and sell a set of 4 of these pieces for $1.99 or $2.99, whatever it was. I don't know how they do that. Anyway, so there's that one. I think that's the one that we painted together, and then this is the other little guy. So I decided to make his hat striped. Their boots and their belts and their coats are the same, but then I just changed up the hats. And I did this one this way to be the opposite of that. So probably this guy will be in the middle, but I don't know. Who knows? Yeah, who knows what they'll be. Anyway, let's start with, and the inspiration for the gnomes. Gnomes are super, still super popular, because if you can go into a craft store and find things like this, then the gnomes are, you know, they're still being a thing. They're still trending, or whatever you want to say. Anyway, this book I've had forever, and this is all about gnomes. And I mean, it's like a storybook. It's like a history book, you know, about gnomes and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun to read. And this was back from the 70s or 80s. I didn't mark these, but these, I have 3 of them. The other one is hiding at the moment. These were done in oil paint, totally oil paint, and they are based directly on this book. So you couldn't get away with doing that today. Yeah, you could not do it. You would get in trouble, copyright trouble, real quick today. Must have been in the 70s. Anyway, so we're gonna go here. You found it? You have a hard copy. Wow. Wow. Hard copy of that book. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to take my palette, which is, I need to put that out of the way because that's, the white is, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this so you can really see. I'm going to put this over to the side. I will try to work on the edge of this so you can see what I'm doing over here. I am right-handed, so I will work that way. I'm going to have this little gnome kind of be up here just so I can keep an eye on him so he doesn't run away. And this has had several coats of the acrylic on it, the base coat, and this is just craft acrylic. That's all it is. It's not anything fancy. It's not artist acrylic. It is craft acrylic. Delta Ceramcoat, Americana. There may be. Oh, there's some Apple Barrel also. So those are the 3 brands that I have, and it's not the brand that I care about, it's the color palette that I care about. So I pulled out all the colors that I want to use, and then I'm going to only hopefully work with those colors, and that way the whole thing will go together. That's how it should work. One of the great things about doing gnomes is that they don't show their eyes. Okay, so you don't see their little eyes. And so that makes these super simple to paint. Super easy to paint. All right, so we're gonna do the beard. I'm gonna start with the beard. And so to shade the beard, I'm gonna use Quaker Gray, just a light gray. Hi, Denise. Good to see you. So I'm just shaking. These bottles of paint have been around for a long time, and they, yeah, they're in various states of usefulness. Some of them are not useful at all, but we're going to make it work. So I'm going to put some gray, a little dab of Quaker Gray there on my palette. I have water that's almost clean, but not quite. I have a stack of paper towels. Okay, it's kind of a thick stack. And then cheap brushes. Okay, just uber cheap brushes. And when I'm doing this technique, I do 2 brushes, and I will see which ones work the best for me. Probably this one is going to work fine, and probably this one. And I'm using angled brushes just because that's what I like to use. And the way the technique works, I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to just start painting. And so, and this is, I will tell you, this is not a way that anybody taught me how to do. It was the way that I trial and error. I wanted things to look like oil paint, like this, because I love the blend of the oil paint. And I could not figure out how to get that look. This came about because of Clausman's paint carving, and everything was three-dimensional, and he would carve it, I would paint it, and I was having the hardest time getting that to work, because I kept getting my hands in it with oil paint, of course, and oil takes a long time to dry, and you can force it dry with some mediums that you use, but you know, then you run the risk of things cracking and chipping off and that kind of stuff, because you haven't let the material dry the way it wants to dry. And so I came up with this way of doing the acrylic undercoat and then coming back over the top of it and doing all the shading and the highlighting and stuff after the undercoat was dry. The undercoat needs to be absolutely dry, but it needs to be accurate. You can't fudge factor if you want to get this look, which you may not care two hoots about this, and that's fine. But you can't fudge it and have a good result. Just like on a wall in a room or in a room in your house, you can't skimp on the undercoat, the primer, and that kind of stuff. If you do, it's always going to look, it's never going to be right. If you start with raw sheetrock and you're building a house and you start with raw sheetrock and you don't prime those walls and you just paint them, the tape is always going to show. There's always stuff that's going to show. It's the law. At least that is my experience. Same thing on doing things like this. Even if they cost 50 cents a piece, they're still worth the time to invest to do it well. All right, so what I do is I'm going to show you once. Let's see if I can show you once, and then we'll go from there. So I have two brushes. One is going to be my brush that is just my cleanup brush, so we'll say that one. And most of the time it's in my mouth, honestly. So I'm going to dip my brush, my painting brush, in the water. I'm going to dab it off. I'm going to pick up the long corner of my brush with the paint, and I'm going to blend it on the palette until there is a blend, until there is a stripe of paint, but it has blended across the brush. Okay? Now, this takes very little time for this to dry. In the time that I'm explaining this to you, this will already have been dry, so I'm going to have to start over. So I start again cleaning the brush. Okay? I dab it on the paper towel, pick up the corner. This is called side loading the brush. So I side load the brush and then move quickly into the phase of painting this little guy, and he just has this one kind of, I don't think there's a separate mustache or anything on this guy. And I do short little pulls of paint wherever I want that. When something goes under or behind something, that's where I put this color. Now, you got to put it on and you got to leave it. You got to let it alone, and you might or might not be able to see that. Yeah, you can see it. Okay, you might have to just leave it alone and let it dry. Hi, Dorothy. So you might just have to let it dry because it will dry very quickly. But you can't, if you try to do this too soon, go back over it with another layer of paint too soon, what happens is it will lift off the color that you just put there. And it takes a minute, it takes a fat minute to figure out how much paint you can carry on the brush and how much water you need to have, because this wood is super dry It's very dry, and so it's sucking up the paint real fast. So I'm going to come back in. And I'm going to come around. So I'm adding more paint this time, more of the shadow color. And then I use the other brush, which is my wet brush, and so it has less water. And then I go very lightly over the edge to blend out that edge, because I want that edge to be, I want it to be a very soft blend. Let's see if I can get this. A very soft blend from the shadow color down into the rest of the beard. Okay? All right, that's the process. So at this point, then you get to just watch, okay? And I'll see what I can come up with to chat about. But that's the process. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. And you can't continue to blend in one spot in your palette for too long, because if you do, that paint starts drying on your palette, and then you start picking up little gobs of dried paint. So I call this chasing the edge, or chasing the paint, where I'm putting down color with one brush and then coming back and I chase the edge away. But this is how I get the and the light is kind of working against us on this white. It'll probably show up a little bit better when we go to one of the other colors. Now, some people who do this, a technique that is kind of like this, they'll use a brush called a mop, and they'll mop the color, mop the edge, and that's fine if that's what works for you. This just happens to be the technique that works the best for me. And I'm not going to worry too much about getting the shadow color exactly on the same side of every little part of his beard. That just doesn't, I don't care about that. And I only put out small amounts of paint because the paint dries. It's acrylic craft paint. It dries very quickly. And so the minute that the paint starts skimming over, you just need to give it up and get out some more fresh paint. Okay, do not stress about trying to save paint when you're doing stuff like this. Just don't. That's going to drive you crazy and frustrate you. And I slapped some paint up there into the red. So I try to come back as quickly as possible. This is not a technique that lets you dilly-dally around. You got to get in there and move when you're doing this. Okay? All right. So I'm going to let that little beard I'm going to let his little beard kind of set up here for a little bit, and I'll need to come back and add a little bit more color here and there. One of the things you need to know about shadows is, I'm going to see if I can put it on this piece of paper. When you are blending shadows, or adding shadows, adding a darker color, it doesn't go like this. Okay? It does not go in a sharp angle. Okay? It goes like, let's see if I can do this where you can see. Comes down, okay. It comes down, and you want to turn a corner. It may be a sharp corner, but the inner edge of that sharp corner, it needs to be blended in a curve, not in a straight line. Okay? Do you see the curve there? That's how light goes. Light doesn't turn unless it's an unusual situation. Light does not cast a shadow that is on that soft inner edge of a shadow. It doesn't usually go in hard lines. It will go hard next to the thing that it's shading, but on the inner edge it's going to fade out. Okay, so let's go back. Let's shade I'm done with the gray for right now. So what I'm going to use now is I'm going to shade the flesh toned part of my little gnome, his little nose and his little hands and so forth. Now I'm going to still try to use this great big brush because I find that I get a better result if I will use a bigger brush. So I will always use the biggest brush I can to do this. Hey Linda, no worries. Alright, so the color I'm going to use is burnt sienna, and burnt sienna is different from one brand to another. They're just all different, yeah. And so this particular one is Americana. My favorite one is Folk Art, and I don't remember if they quit making it. I can't remember. I don't seem to have any. So I'm going to have to look it up and find out. That's my favorite burnt sienna. Anyway, process is the same. Damp brush, and it will take time for you to get on to how much water you need to have. It's just practice. But I like using this waxed palette, wax paper type palette to do the blending on because it's smooth. Okay, so I'm going to come up here next to where his little hand is, next to his sleeve. Yeah, this brush is really big. I think I can do it though. And it is not unusual for me to come back and add the color, the shadow color, more than once. That's a little heavier. It's unusual that I get it the way I want it the first time. That one I may have gotten the first time. And then I'm going to come up here where his little nose is, and we're going to see if we can make his nose appear to be more round. Now, if you sealed this, if you seal the wood, which means you've spray sealed it or you've given it a coat of a brush sealer or brush varnish of some kind after you've done the base coating, so it's a slicker surface, the blending will blend more evenly. But the downside is the shadow colors, the colors that you're putting on there, are going to take longer to dry. So I prefer actually to work on top of the raw wood that has just had the base coat on it. As opposed to sealing it first. But, you know, a lot of it's personal preference. Okay, so we have his little hands have a little bit of shadow where they're up against his sleeves. Okay, and his little nose is a little bit, shadowed. We're gonna give one side of it a little bit more. So always blend on the palette first. Okay. All right. And then let's he also has his little mouth here. Let me try and emphasize that also. I'm going to put a little bit of the gray on my brush. And I may add just a touch of the burnt sienna into that gray, so I get a warmer color. And on this little ornament, they have a little mouth drawn in. And so I'm going to see if I can get that little shadow. Doesn't have to be much, but a little bit around his mouth. And then when I paint in his mouth, his lip there, it should make more sense. Okay, good enough. Moving on. Hello, Angela, Adele, voice, actor. That is quite. That is quite the handle there. Burnt sienna on Amazon, Americana, a little pricey. You know, but a bottle of it lasts forever. And you can use something else also. You don't have to use one brand. Just because I use one brand, you can use any brand. Okay, let's shadow his little hat. And I'm going to try it with burnt sienna first. If I don't like it, I'll probably come back and add burnt umber to it in another layer. So we're going to add some shading where his hat slouches over his face. Yeah, this is not going to be dark enough, but it'll be a good first layer. I don't mind spending time on these and creeping up on the color layer by layer. I'm okay with that. Yeah, you You really can't see the difference, so we're going to have to, oh, I know what we're going to do. I'm going to add cranberry wine to this mix. I had pulled that out to use. So we're going to use some cranberry wine, which is also an Americana color. So we may use some cranberry wine and also some burnt sienna. Has a paint booger in the bottle. When your paint gets snotty, it's probably time to get a new bottle. Hey, Starla. All right, let's try this again. Let's go with the cranberry wine. I really need to get some new paints. I'm going to put a little bit of the burnt sienna in it to warm it up a little bit. So I'm just blending those two colors together right there. And then we're going to come over what I just did because it's dry by now. And by using the angled brush, I can let that the long part of that angle, I let it do the work for me. And then the other part of the brush is laying flat on the surface, and so that's blending as we go. So sometimes I don't even have to use the blending brush. All right, so let's add some more of that. I need a little bit more water here. It is a dance between getting enough water and too much water on your brush and the right amount of paint. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some slouches into his hat. So I'm going to add a little bit of shading, and I need a little bit more color. Let's see. This cranberry wine is pretty translucent, so I'm having trouble getting enough color. All right, let's try again. So to get this, it is a triangle of color. So whitest out at the outer edge of the hat, and then coming to a point as it comes into the hat. And then I'm just going to blend the edges of those triangle shapes, just barely touching the wood, so that I begin to get that shape coming in from the sides, and that helps to create that slouchy effect of his little hat. Hopefully you can see that. And then we're going to do some more. It's just a it's a constant moving back and forth between the palette of paint and the water and loading your brush. The way that you want to get it loaded with enough color that it shows. Okay. And then we're going to let that dry, and I'm just going to let that dry, and then I'm going to highlight his little hat. I may give it one more shot of shading down here close to his face. Let's see if we can put a little bit more. Anytime you are adding additional shading, it should be less in area than it was the first time. So if you're going in with a darker color or more, then you add less each time, hopefully. And the deepest parts of a shape, like where the nose, where the hat meets the nose, that is going to be a really deep area against, it's because the hat is behind his nose. So I often go back and deepen that shading a little bit, just little parts. Okay. All right, does that making sense to you guys? Okay. All right. So let's see if we can put his little face, his little lip in there. How do I want to do this? All right, we're going to live dangerously, and we're going to put a little, I'm going to put a little bit of tomato spice red out here. And we also have some burnt sienna out here. This is a big brush. I'm not sure this is a smart move, but So I'm going to blend some of the tomato spice and the burnt sienna on the palette. Okay, that's pretty orangey, so we're going to add a little bit more burnt sienna there. That's a little better. Make sure I don't have too much water hanging on my brush. All right, now I'm going to use that corner of that brush. We're going to see how this goes. If it doesn't go well, we're going to have to backtrack, back out of this, but let's see. So I'm going to paint in here where his little mouth is. So I pretty much put it on and then wiped most of it back off. We're going to go again, see what we can do again. Okay, so we have his little mouth started here. So you just start and see how things are going to react. Now his mouth is too red, but we'll deal with that in a minute. And we want to have a little bit of this tomato spice. That's my favorite blush color on figures. But I want it really super duper light. Like really hardly any color. And I'm going to put this where the shading meets where the inner edge of the shading is. That was a little too light. Right at the edge of that shadow color. To rosy up his little nose. So we pinked up his little nose a little bit more. He's out where it's cold. So I've added a little bit of a rosy glow to his nose, which also helps to make it look more three-dimensional, not so flat. I also am going to do the same thing to his little hand. Not necessarily the entire hand. I don't want to turn his hand pink or red, but I like having a tint of color, an accent of color on his little hand. Blend it with the damp brush, and then I blended it. If you blend it all away, which is what I did, then you put it back on. And blend it again if you need to. Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back up here to his mouth, and I'm going to shadow inside his lip because that's way too red or pink up there. So I'm going to get some just straight burnt sienna blended on the palette. Damp brush ready. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go inside his little lip, like his mouth is open. Okay, so hope you saw that. I've got the camera zoomed in so tightly that I got to be really careful where I'm working here. Okay, so there's his little mouth. So he's got a little lip, and then he's got a little shadow inside his mouth, like his mouth is open. Okay, let's do his little. Let's shade his little boot here. Okay, so this color I'm going to use is light avocado to shade his little boots with. So the process is the same, a little green, and the blending process is the same. I pick up a little bit of the green, find a spot on the palette that I can blend it, and I probably will put a little bit of burnt sienna in with it just to tone that color so it's not just straight out of the bottle green. Little short pulls. Will put the color down and help blend it right away. Okay, like so. And pick up some more color, some more water, a little bit more color, And I'm going to bring that color around a little bit. It is just such a dance of getting the right color and the right amount of paint and the right amount of water. All right, and then I'm going to separate his little boots just a little bit. So that because he doesn't have any, you can't see any pants. So this is our suggestion of his legs. Okay, so there we got that. Any questions so far from anybody? All right, now I'm going to have to, let's see, I'm going to try it. I'm going to live dangerously here. And I'm going to shade his little coat. Let's see. I'm going to use this pewter gray, and I'm going to use the baby blue. Okay, so I'm going to mix these two. So I've got pewter gray, which is right here. That's what I just put out. And you'll notice that I waste paint. It's just the hazard of the doing of the thing. And that is why I use craft paint to do this, because it's pretty cheap. I can paint for a long time with the amount of craft paint that I use. 1 2-ounce bottle of craft paint can last me forever. It dries out. It ruins in the bottle faster than I can use up the bottle. So therefore, I don't care if I waste some paint. You do want to keep the excess paint off your hands, because if you get paint on your hands and it's wet at all, like this is all dry, but if it was wet at all and you pick up your item, you're going to be sorry. And as your paper towel gets wet and has yucky paint and stuff, then I just refold the towel. So I usually have just a whole bunch of paper towels in a wad. I just refold it so I have a clean spot to work in. It probably was not a good demo, but this is a clean section. Okay, let's see if we can shade his little coat. So process being exactly the same. I'm going to use these two colors. Same thing. I've got one clean brush and one painting brush. Alright, now you see how this just happened? That's from leaving brushes in water. So I had to do this to one of my other brushes the other day. So I just get out the 3-in-1, put some paint on it and put the brush back together, and then that will set up fairly quickly. But that is not uncommon. When you're using cheap paintbrushes and you're putting them in water, I do try not to let them sit in water too long, but that will put your brush back together, and then you can keep working. Okay, so meanwhile, back at the jacket. So I got blue. I'm going to use gray. I'm just using the blue because that was the base color of his jacket. Now let's see how this works. I may have to pick up another blue to put in with it, but let's try it. Let's try it and see what happens. Okay, here's his little jacket. Ooh, that's not blended very well. Okay, we're going to be careful. This is a big fat brush for doing this. So I'm really tipping up on the edge on that long corner. Yeah, we're going to have to get another blue to put in with it. That's not going to show enough. Okay, let me get another blue. We'll see if this color is still good. This is Apple Barrel Midnight Blue. Okay, so we're going to put, let's see how this one works. I bet this is going to be a better color. Okay, let's try again. That's what happens, you know, when you, yeah, that's going to be a better color. And that's kind of the blue and the gray all mixed together already. So, bonus. All right, here we go. Let's see if we can keep going here. One of the nice things about these little ornaments is that they have the lines already added to the ornament. I guess they're lasered in there. I don't really know. And so they, you know exactly where things are because the lines are there, and you can't lose them. They're not pattern lines like you've drawn in, and so you can't lose the line. And so you know exactly where you're going, hopefully. If the paint will not move, then you got to stop and just get some more water and blend again. Now this takes me a lot longer to explain than it does to do it, so kind of have to. It would not take me quite this long to do this if I were just painting. But I'm having to stop, I'm having to think about how to explain to you what I'm doing. It's much easier to do than it is to talk about, to do this little exercise in shading. All right, we have a little, he has a little section under his arm. Right there. He has a section that goes under his beard. And he has a tiny little section under this beard. Okay. That's right. If you don't like it, you just go again. Acrylic was my absolute nemesis when I first started working with it. I just found it so hard to work with because I was used to oil paint that you could blend, and if you did, and reblend, you know, and I found that so much easier for me because it's what I learned on was oil. And then when I'm having to, it's like I gotta figure this out, you know. If I don't figure this out, I'm never going to be able to paint these figures that Clausman was carving. You know, I'm never going to be able to do that. And so I really did have to come up with a way to make it work, but I personally hated the way that most of the wood carvers things looked, because most of the wood carvers would do these beautiful jobs carving and then they would paint them and they would look like this. They would just be flat color. So they have these beautiful carvings and all the color is just completely flat. And I'm like, there's gotta be a way to do this. And so I just kept working on it and kept working on it, and finally came up with this way of doing it, which for me works. And the funny thing was, I had a lot of carvers that wanted me to, they liked the way our pieces looked, and they wish they could paint like that. They wish they could, that I would teach them how to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll teach you how to do it. Put a group together. I'll tell you what I'll charge for it. And I'll teach you how to do it. I'll teach you everything I know that I've figured out. Well, that was a different story. That I was going to charge them. They didn't want to pay me to do that, and I'm like, nope. Watercolor and gouache. Yep. I'm not good with gouache. I've tried it a little bit. I don't know why, but I'm not so great with that. Okay, so now what I want to do with this is I want to see if we can highlight his beard a little bit, just because I want to see if we can do it. Okay. So let's use a little bit of plain white. The beard was painted in this light ivory. I'm going to highlight it in white so you may be able to see the difference. This is much brighter white. So let's try it. If it doesn't work, you know what? We'll always wish it had. So I'm going to use a really cruddy brush. I gotta find one here. There should be one here that's really awful. Let's find one. I keep the cruddy brushes the same way that I keep the good ones. Alright, this one's pretty cruddy. Do you see how this is a super cheap brush? Do you see how it's a round brush, but it's all splayed out at the end? We're going to see how this works. So we're going to put some white out here. And I'm going to use this cruddy brush. And I'm going to get a hold of some white and pounce it a little bit. This white paint's pretty stiff. And I'm going to pounce this in the area where his beard would kind of bulge out over his chin and stuff. And over his big belly. And I'm not getting the paint to move very well, so I'm going to add a little water into the mix. There we go. So I pounced a little bit. White is so hard to show you. But there is a shadow color, the base color, and then some highlight with the white. Okay? Alright, let's see if we can make this work a little bit more obviously up here in his hat. So I'm going to use this color, which is Spiced Pumpkin by Dorothy. Sleep well, my friend. Sleep well. Alright, let's come up here a little bit somewhere. Put a little spiced pumpkin. Okay, a little spiced pumpkin. I'm going to use that same cruddy brush. I'm going to mess it up. I'm just messing it up on my brush, on my paper towel. And it's dry. Alright, let's get a hold of some of this and kind of pounce it out. Alright, I'm going to go up here in the top of his hat because there's no shading up here. So let's see how this works. And I'm going to use a little bit of tomato spice in case I need it. So I'm going to have some of that ready. So if I need some of that, I've got some. So what this is going to do is give it a little bit of highlight, and also it's going to give it a soft texture like wool maybe. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and pick up a little bit more of the spiced pumpkin. Now, do you have to spend this much time doing something like this? Absolutely not. But you see, something like this, I totally totally enjoy the process of figuring out how to take a flat thing, because on these, this is not like a carving. A wood carving has the shape. Well, these don't. You got to create the shape because these suckers are flat as a flitter. So I'm having to make the poochy, slouchy hat, and to make the jacket look like it goes over his hand or his belly, and his beard goes over his tummy or his chin or whatever. Okay, so there we should have a little bit of texture that you can see. And probably the other thing we're going to do on the one, this is the one in the oil paint. You see how the little boots are? Let me see if I can find the thing in the, well, yeah, here, we can just see it on the cover of the book. Their little boots are actually fur, okay? Well, I'm not going to paint fur on there, but what I am going to do is I'm going to pounce a little bit of color on there in that same technique to see if we can get his little boot to have a little bit more essence of fur. So we're going to put a little bit of light ivory, and we'll put a little tiny bit of this green tea out because I may need it. It's better to have it out than to have to all of a sudden try to get it out. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make this brush. This is like cheapest, super cheap brush. I don't know where it came from, but very cheap. It says Faber-Castell, but it's not. This is not a high quality brush right here. Okay, so let's get a little bit of the light ivory, and we're going to go right in the center-ish area of the little boot. And then maybe come back on top of that with a little bit of the green tea. And if it's getting out of hand, you got to work fast. Because I kind of let it get away from me a little bit. It's alright, it's still got some of it. We still got some texture out of it. Lost my chat again. There we go. Okay. I did let my hula hoop go. I sure did. I let it go. I did. I decided that I was not agile enough. I used to do hula hoop, but I decided that I was not good enough to be able to do that anymore. I wasn't persistent enough. I just would not persist in making myself learn it. Okay, and so I've washed out this brush because that was going to dry in there way too fast. So I've washed out the brush. All right, well, the last thing we're going to do on this one is we're going to use some burnt umber and shade his little belt a little bit. I know we did have fun with it, but oh man, what a joke for me to think I was going to be able to do that. Alright, I'm going to have to drop down to a smaller brush, even though I don't want to. But that is the tiniest little belt there. Tiny, tiny. Okay, the color I got out was burnt umber, and it is right there with the big bubble in it. Let me turn this around. Okay, let's try this way. Okay, let's see if we can make this work. I'm going to put him on this white. Alright, I got to get myself ready. So I got the brush, clear water. I got the new brush. I got some burnt umber. Okay, I need more water. Alright, let's see how this goes. Alright, he's got a little belt over here. He's got a teeny belt in there, which we don't want to turn it brown, but I do want it to have a little shading, essence of shading. I've got a little bit. Cleaned this brush out. It's got some soap in it. It's putting bubbles in my paint. This brand of burnt umber, which is Ceram Coat, is very translucent. And a little bit over here on the side where it goes around his body. I don't know if you can even see that, whether it makes any difference to you or not. You need a little bit more. Try it again, a little bit more over here on the side. That's better. Okay, now you can see it. And I'm going to put a little bit more over here on this side. Okay, and then we have a teeny little bit back in here that's okay. I think he's about put together. We need to shade his mouth again. I'm gonna pull. Let's see. Maybe we can get it with. Maybe we can get it with the burnt umber. He has a happy little mouth. And I'm going to shade under his lip one more time. So I'm going to go back to the gray. So this is the Quaker gray that I was using to shade his beard. So we're going to go back and see if we can make this. You know, sometimes I get, I know as crazy as it sounds, I get fixated on an area that doesn't suit me. And I will go back to it as many times as I have to. To get it to look the way I want it to look. And this is doing better. Okay, I think I can live with that. Maybe. Maybe. Okay, that's working better for me. Then you have to wait and let it dry and see if it's going to be what you want it to be once it's dry. Okay, so there's our little guy with his little hat, which has got some shading and some highlighting. So it's got a puffy hat, his little beard, he's got on a cute little jacket and some furry boots. And so let's put him on top of the house and see how he looks on top of the house, which has not been painted yet, but let's see what he looks like when he's on top of the house. And let me get him over here where you can actually see him. That would be very good. We can actually put him where you can see him. Okay, so there he is on top of the house. So let's see if I can hold him. There you go. So you can see what he looks like. Okay. Now, as opposed to his two friends who have not had any shading or highlighting done to them, hopefully you can tell a difference, I hope. Where if you don't see it in any other way, look at the nose. You see it in the nose and the boots. I think that's where you really see it in the light here. Okay? Well, I don't know about you, but I think he's kind of stinking cute. Let's see from this angle if you can see him. There we go. I think he looks pretty darn cute. Okay, so there he is. So we have 1 out of 3 done, and we have not done anything to the mushrooms or the house. So this painting project could last a while, but I think it's something that might give you some things to learn for future projects. You can do the same kind of thing, and we have done them on those plaster ornaments that you buy at the craft store. In fact, I have a whole bunch of them up here in my closet on the shelf. I've done those in the past also. The danger with the plaster ornaments or porcelain, some of them are porcelain, some of them are a cast material. If they hit the floor, man, they are shattered and gone. At least with these, if they hit the floor, they might chip a little bit, but they're not going to just fall apart. So, there you go. All right. Good. Glad you enjoyed it. All right. I will be back on Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern. I will see you then. There is going to be some time in July that I'm going to be gone. I will let you know that. It's not for another couple of weeks. But I will let you know that I will be gone for a couple of weeks in July, but I will be here until then. So, as always, I will see you Friday. Come back on Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern. And I will see you then. And I hope you have a good rest of your week or whenever you're watching. And I'll see you before you know it. So as always, till I see you again, remember to get creative every day, because you know it's easy. I'll see you soon. Bye.